Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyBaking.com. Today we're going to make a date and walnut bread, and this is what it looks like. This is a really moist, quick bread, and it's got flavors of walnuts and the sweet dates and even just a hint of cinnamon. So the first thing we need to do when we're making this quick bread is to soften our dates, because we are using dried dates. Now you will find dried dates usually in the produce section of your grocery store, and they're usually sold in plastic tubs or even boxes. And you will need pitted dry dates. Now oftentimes you can buy them that way. If not, you can just do it yourself. So you just take your date, and normally there's a little hard piece of stem, just cut that off. And then all you need to do is just cut it in half like that, and then you have your seed, and just remove that. And then what you want to do is just coarsely chop your dates. So you will need 8 ounces, 225 grams of dried pitted dates. If you want to go by cup measurement, that would be 1.5 cups of firmly packed chopped dates. So once you do that, just put them in a heat-proof bowl. And so we're going to soften them. So I'm just going to add just a pinch of salt, like 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And then we need 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. That will help. The reason we're softening dried dates is, as you probably noticed, a date, the outside skin is kind of tough. And so it needs the baking soda and then hot water or boiling water. So what I have here is 1 cup, 240 milliliters of boiling water, and just pour that over top. And that combination of the hot water and the baking soda, and if you let it sit for a while, it will soften that outer skin. And plus, while it's the dates are sitting in the hot water, some of the juices will be released, so then the water becomes nice and sweet as well. So that's all you do. And then just put that aside and let that cool to room temperature. I usually let it sit for about a half hour. That's about how long it takes. So while that's cooling off and softening, we want to toast our walnuts. So preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need 1/2 cup, which is 50 grams of a walnut. I mean, you could use like pecans or some other type of nut if you want, or almonds if you want. But just put your walnuts on a baking sheet. And I'm going to bake them about 8-10 minutes until they're nice and lightly brown. But really, the way you can tell nuts are done is you can start to smell them. Okay, so our walnuts are nice toasted, so that's kind of what you're looking for. So what I'm going to let the nuts cool completely, and then just coarsely chop them. And then I'm going to let that cool down, and when we come back, we'll make our batter. So now it's been about a half hour, and as you can see, the dates have absorbed a lot of that water. And then, so that's what you're looking for, and they're nice and soft. And then this is the walnuts. I've just coarsely chopped them. So now, this is like quick bread. It's a very easy batter to make. I'm going to do part of it in my food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you can just do it in a large bowl. So, before I start that, we need to prepare our pan. So you will need a loaf pan. And then I like to butter it. You could spray it with one of those nonstick sprays if you want as well. So I'm just taking a little melted butter with a pastry brush and just brushing the bottom and the sides of our pan, because that'll help prevent the bread from sticking, which we don't want. And then what I like to do, just to make sure that our bread doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan, I'm going to take just a little piece of parchment paper and put it in there. Now, Just leave your oven at that 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius, because that's the temperature. Okay, now we can get back to the batter. So what I'm going to do is put 2 cups, that's 260 grams of all-purpose flour, you may know that as plain flour, in the food processor, along with a half a cup, 105 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. If you got some lumps, I'll just kind of rid of those, although the food processor will do that for me. And then just a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, and then 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder for leavening. And I like to add just a half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. If you don't like cinnamon, you can just leave it out. But I find it, with the dates, it's really a nice combination there. So what I'm going to do is just process this till it's combined. So if you were doing this instead in a bowl, you just use a wire whisk or a spoon and just mix it all together. Okay, simple enough. So now I'm going to add some butter. You will need a half a cup, 113 grams of cold butter. Make sure it's cold. And then I just cut it into little tiny cubes like this. And just put that in there. And then I'm just going to process this until it, like, the whole mixture is like coarse breadcrumbs, so the butter gets into little small pieces. Now, if you were going to do it in a bowl, which you could do, then you could use one of these pastry blenders and just cut it in. You could use 2 knives, or you could just use your fingertips, and it's the same thing. Yeah, that looks good. So this is what you're looking for. Just so the butter's into really small pieces. So now what I'm going to do is, now I'm going to do the rest of it by hand. So like I said, you can make the whole thing by hand if you want. Make sure I get all that flour. Okay. So now, move that out of the way. So now, I'm going to add our walnuts. Stir that in. I find it's good if you coat the nuts with a bit of flour. That helps to prevent them from sinking to the bottom of the pan during baking. And that's also why you want to you don't want to have your walnuts in too large of a piece, or they do tend to drop during baking. And then what I have here in a separate bowl is 1 large egg, and have that at room temperature. And I'm just going to whisk that to break it up. And then add, for flavoring, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. If you don't want to have a vanilla flavor, you can just leave that out. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of make a little well in the center of my dry ingredients. And then I'm just going to pour in the egg. See, this is really easy to make. It's such a nice tea bread. And then I'm going to add, now you want to add the dates and all that water. Don't want to waste that, because now the water has really become flavored with the dates. Nice sweet flavor. And then just stir. Mix it all together. Now whenever you're doing this type of batter, you know, muffin batter, quick breads, even scones, you just want to mix it until everything is moistened. No longer, because if you overmix, whoops, you will, the bread could get a little tough in texture, which we don't want. We want it nice and soft. Really smell the dates. You may notice that this is remarkably similar to a scone dough. Okay. It's coming together now. Oh, it's wonderful. Make sure all that flour is mixed in. Okay, I'm happy with that. So now just take your pan and scoop it in. Oh, a little flour there. Mix that in. Okay. And then you can just use either an offset spatula. I'm just using the back of my spoon. Just smooth it out. So now we're going to bake this. As I always say, everyone's oven is a little different, so just keep that in mind. It will take about 55 to 65 minutes. So it will rise, it'll turn a beautiful golden brown color, and a toothpick inserted into the center will just come out clean. Okay, our date and walnut bread is now done. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Beautiful golden brown color. And a toothpick inserted in the center will just come out clean. So now what I'm going to do is just cool it completely in the pan on a wire rack. And when we come back, I'll show you how to take it out of the pan and we will try a piece. So now our bread has cooled enough, so we should be able to remove it from the pan. So either take a knife or a spatula and just run along the inside edges just to make sure it's not sticking. Good. And then out. And actually the parchment paper stayed in the pan, so that's good. We don't have to peel it off. So there we have it. Doesn't that look gorgeous? So now let's cut a slice. I'll put it on the cutting board. And still a little warm. But there, oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? Nice and moist. Let's cut a little piece. Now you will notice when you first bake this bread, the first day, that the outside crust is nice and crispy, but when you cover and store it overnight, that will soften. It's a really flavorful bread. Nice and moist. You got the crunch of the walnuts, and then you've got the sweet dates, and then you got a little vanilla, cinnamon flavor. Very nice. So you can just eat it plain, or I often like a little butter with the bread, or even cream cheese even is very nice on there. So you can cover and store this for probably 4 or 5 days. You can also freeze it. So enjoy. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyBaking.com.